Good afternoon, everybody. Pastor Shane here, and I am going to be giving my third Advent message. Previous weeks we did peace, we did hope, and today we're going to do joy. And I'm not going to sing anything. Hey, bud, what's up? You good? All right. You can go and play in your room for a little bit. I'm giving a sermon. Okay? I'll let you know when I'm done, okay? All right. Thanks. All right. Okay, so, like I said, we did peace first week. We did hope last week. I remember the first week, the main thing I said was the peace of the future is the peace that we choose today. Last week I talked about hope. We have hope that peace is possible because it's been promised. And when we claim that promise, the promise of hope, we change and it has an impact on us. Today, I'm going to talk about the promise of joy and seeking that in the darkest moments. And as I was writing this, I really, I say this a lot, but it was especially true with this message, is that I had myself in mind a lot of this. I did stop to think about other people, but I really wrote this a lot for me. And I think there are just a bunch of people in my life right now. I'm not going to call it any names because you know who you are, but there are a bunch of people that I know right now that really need to hear this particular message about joy and how we're going to frame it. Let's just get into it and then you'll see. I'm going to start off by reading the scriptures again. This week we're doing Isaiah 35, the whole 10 verses. And we're also doing Matthew 11, verses 2 through 11. And so I'll read those and then we'll get into the message. And so Isaiah 35 says, "Imagine the wilderness whooping for joy, the desert's unbridled happiness with its spring flowers. It will happen. The deserts will come alive with new growth budding and blooming, singing and celebrating with sheer delight. The glory of Lebanon's cedars and the majesty of Carmel and Sharon will spill over to the deserts. The glory of the Eternal One will be on full display there, and they will revel in the majestic splendor of our God. So with confidence and hope in this message, strengthen those with feeble hands, shore up the weak-kneed and weary, tell those who worry, the anxious and fearful, take strength, have courage, there is nothing to fear. Look here, your God, right here is your God. The balance is shifting. God will right the wrongs. None other than God will give you success. He is coming to make you safe. Then, such healing, such repair. The eyes of the blind will be opened. The ears of the deaf will be clear. The lame will leap like deer excited. They will run and jump tirelessly and gracefully. The stutterer, the stammerer, and the tongue of the mute will sing out and clear in joyful song. Waters will pour through the deserts, streams will flow in God-forsaken lands. Burning sands and hardened wastelands will become pools shimmering with life. The thirsty ground will drink deep from refreshing springs. Abandoned villages where predators once lurked will become grassy playgrounds. Dry, arid land will turn lush and green. And the road to this happy renovation will be clearly signed. People will declare the way itself to be holy, the route sacred. Only those who are right with God will be able to walk its pleasant path. And nobody, no visitor, no dimwit will get lost along it. There will be no lions lying in wait, no predators or dangers in sight. Only those made right with God will journey there. Those whom the Eternal One has recalled from a punishing exile, they will go along so easily. They will walk this path, come waltzing to Zion, singing their way to that place of right relation to God. An aura of joy never ending will attend them. They will clasp gladness and joy to their hearts, while sadness and despair evaporate into thin air. That's Isaiah 35. Matthew 11, 2 through 11, a lot less joyful, but we'll actually get to why this is the gospel reading for the third week of Advent in a bit. So Matthew 11, 2 through 11, and it says, "With that, Jesus finished instructing his disciples, and he went on to preach and teach in the towns of Galilee. John, meanwhile, was still in prison, but stories around the Anointed One's teachings and healings reached him. So John sent the followers to question Jesus, and they said this. They said, "Are you the one we have been expecting as Savior for so long? Are you the one Scripture promised would come? Or should we expect someone else?" Jesus replied, "Go back and tell John the things you have heard and the things you have seen. Tell him you have seen the blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers cured, the deaf hear, the dead raised, and the good news preached to the poor. Blessed are those who understand what is afoot and stay on my narrow path." John's disciples left, and Jesus began to speak to a crowd about John. And this is what he said. "What did you go into the desert to see? Did you expect to see a reed blowing around in the wind? No? Were you expecting to see a man dressed in the finest silks? No, of course not. You find silk in a sitting room of palaces and mansions, not in the middle of the wilderness. So what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, a prophet, and more than a prophet. When you saw John, you saw the one whom the prophet Malachi envisioned when he said, 'I will send my messenger ahead of you, and he will prepare the way for you.' This is the truth. No one who has ever been born to a woman is greater than John the Baptist, and yet the most insignificant person in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." Now, we've used a bunch of those scriptures all the time for other purposes, but we're going to actually focus on the bigger picture of John being in prison and hearing this message from Jesus when he starts to have doubts. That's what we're going to focus on today. So, as I've said before, and as I kind of showed throughout these other two messages, is that for Isaiah especially, just like peace, joy is promised, and we can choose it. Just like I said for peace and for hope last week. During the first week, Isaiah says, "There will come a day. There will come a day." So he's saying, listen, I promise you, there will come a day. Last week's message was called the will of hope, and everything in Isaiah it wasn't a maybe, it wasn't a perhaps, it could happen, it was, this will happen. It will happen. And again, in Isaiah this week, we have that again. The line is, "It will happen." And it's promised. Joy, this idea of hope and peace and joy, it's promised. We don't just blindly wish for it to happen. We know it's going to happen because it's been promised. But here's the thing, especially with joy, as opposed to the other ones, is we don't experience joy alone. A lot of us think we can find it by ourselves, but we can't. Joy is communal. It's shared and shareable. You don't find it in selfishness, and I think that's where we get a lot of our misunderstanding about whether we can find joy in misery or find joy when we're in our darkest places, because we mistake joy for I'm going to say joy for happiness, but really what it boils down to is when we are talking about joy, we're often talking about what makes me happy rather than a sense of overflowing contentment, right? And you do not find that in selfishness. If you're only going to make yourself happy, or you're only trying to make yourself happy, then you're not seeking joy. You're just really seeking anesthesia, right? A lot of times when we talk about I just want to be happy, we're talking about, thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah, so a lot of times when we're talking about, I want to be happy, can't you just be happy for me? What we're really talking about is, I need this anesthesia. I need this thing that will numb my pain, numb my misery. And so when we're talking about seeking happiness, we're usually talking about our own happiness. And a lot of times at the expense of others. That is not joy. That is not joy. That's selfishness. That's, that's greediness. But that's not joy. We find joy. You really think about it. Think about joy for a second. And the time when you felt the most joy, it involved somebody else. You didn't get that by yourself. It involved somebody else in some way. You find joy by building others up, by forming relationships and really living those out or experiencing a relationship in a way you never have. That's why when relationships break, when somebody dies, when somebody betrays you, when something like that happens, that's why it hurts so bad. Because they didn't just make you unhappy, they broke your joy, right? Because they took the thing that bound you together, this compatibility, this feeling, this emotion that's just super strong, and they broke it in some way. Now, whether it was intentional or not, like sometimes people die, we don't expect them to, but that's why it hurts so bad, because the connection is broken. But joy is found in building others up, in forming those relationships, right? Isaiah says that. He says as much, that this joy is found in this way. He doesn't say strengthen your own hands. He doesn't say go do this thing for you, go be happy, go do what makes you happy, go find yourself. He doesn't say go strengthen your own hands. He doesn't even say, and this will, for my social justice warriors and those progressive Christians out there like me who really harp on helping others, he doesn't even say go and heal. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say go heal them, right? He says go and strengthen the weak hands of others. He says go help them out. Go strengthen the weak hands of others. And through that, that's where the healing occurs, right? He says as a result of building up the relationship, as a result of building up somebody else, that's where the healing happens. Isaiah, I love it in this passage and in other places, he doesn't imply that healing just happens, like we go heal people. We don't. We Christians would say God heals people, right? We just assist. Well, how do we do that? We do that by building people up, by having those real relationships. And that's why relationships that are broken relationships, and even among people who should be close, brothers and sisters, mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, when those aren't working correctly, it's because those relationships have broken down. 1 second. Yes, sir. I'm live on Facebook, man, so let's hurry up.
When I was in the room,
yeah,
I was actually cleaning.
All right, good. Go keep cleaning. That's actually awesome.
It's done.
Come here. We'll look at it, but here, you want to say hi to the folks?
No.
No? We're talking about joy here, and this is something that brings me joy. All right. All right, so where was I? It's like, so once others are strengthened and built up, that is when healing occurs. It happens as a result of strengthening that bond, right? The joy doesn't only come in the healing. I think a lot of times, and this is especially true for me, a lot of times we think we'll be happy when something happens, when we get to a certain place, a certain thing happens, we achieve a certain goal. We think that's when the joy will occur. But that isn't actually that's not what Isaiah is saying here. And that's certainly just, it doesn't seem to have been true for me in my life. Yeah, I get happy, but then it's on to the next thing that makes me happy, or the next joy hit that I'm trying to seek, right? It's not the thing. It's not the destination that brings the joy. It's that journey toward a destination that really builds the anticipation and really builds that joy in there, so that when the healing does come, it's a both and. It's not either or. I would say we don't like to go on the journey. We want the end result, but the end result isn't nearly as joyful without the journey. Joy isn't only in arriving at the destination. Joy is found along the journey, especially in a journey with other people. Especially in a journey with other people. When we bring people along. When people bring us along. That's really where the joy is found, right? And when we spend the journey bringing others along, building others up, finding that joy, we can never lose our way. That's another thing that Isaiah says in this chapter, is that even the dumb people, when living and journeying in a joyful way, you can't lose your way. And there's talk about only those who are right with God can experience this. And I agree with that. But I don't mean like if you're saved, you can experience it. What I think is really meant here, and honestly, what salvation comes down to so often is these blessings, these benefits that we supposedly receive as a part of our salvation or as our right relationship with God. Only people who are seeking those things and trying to find those things will find them, right? If you're trying to live in that right relationship with God, yes, you're going to be joyful. You're going to find joy in ways, and we'll get to how that looks in a bit, right? Because I know I'm getting really close to maybe implying that, okay, so if I'm in misery right now, does that mean I'm not right with God, or I can't be good with God, or that I'm not praying hard enough, or I'm not a good enough Christian? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. And actually, we're about to address that right now. Because you could say, wait a minute, what about that gospel, right? What about John the Baptist? He was probably in the least joyful position imaginable. He's in prison. He probably knows he's going to be executed. He probably knows his days are numbered. And he's having doubts about the person who basically got him there. He proclaimed this word about Jesus coming, about the Messiah coming, and the expectation for the Messiah back then was not a passive, peaceful person. It was a warrior, a conqueror that was going to come overthrow the oppressive government and liberate the Jewish people, right? Emmett, I need you to be quiet, man. I need you to be quiet. Go back in the room, please. No, go. Go, man. I asked you to be quiet before. You can tell me after. I'm almost done. Yeah, he's starting to have doubts about Jesus. Like, is Jesus this person, right? Is Jesus the promised one? So he gets put in prison because he preaches his word about Jesus and calls out the corruption of the government. That is like the other thing that got him in there. But, he gets put in there, so he knows he's probably going to die in prison. And now he's having doubts about Jesus. Where is the joy here? Where is the joy? Well, I think as I read that gospel, that story about John, I think the thing we can take away from this in terms of joy is that John finds his joy, or finds joy, not the only joy he ever had, but John actually, I think, finds joy in prison. He finds joy in his darkest moment. Okay, John finds joy in his darkest moment. He sent followers to Jesus to ask him if he was the promised one. And Jesus sends back a message that I think could only have brought John an overwhelming sense of joy, even in the middle of being in prison, knowing he's probably going to die there. I believe that what Jesus had to say in response to John would have brought him just immeasurable joy. And this is what he says. If you don't remember what was in that passage, he says, "Go back and tell John the things you have heard and the things you have seen. Tell him you have seen the blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers cured, the deaf hear, the dead raised, and the good news preached to the poor." And then he says, "Blessed are those who understand what is afoot and stay on my narrow path." Right? Jesus sends John a message that says, "John, your life was not wasted." He says, "John, you were right." He said, "John, the prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled right now." Now, if you're having doubts and you're in prison because you believed that somebody was something, just imagine you're John. You're sitting in prison and you're wondering, I'm probably going to die for this man. Is he who I think he is? Was I right? Did I waste my time? Did I die for nothing? And Jesus' response is, no, you didn't. And no, you aren't. And yes, you were right. And I believe if it were me and I heard that, that doesn't make facing death easy. But man, there's got to be something about knowing for sure that the thing you committed your life to was worth it, right? I can't imagine much bigger joy than that, than knowing the thing that you committed your life to was worth it, right? I think, just like John, we can find joy in our darkest moments too, if we look for the good around us. And ultimately, John did that. John seeks an answer, he gets it, and I think, it doesn't say it in the gospel, but I have to believe that in hearing this, John, why ask it if you weren't going to believe it or you weren't going to focus on it, right? I believe John could have focused on the good. If he did focus on the good in that, he could find joy. And I believe that. And I think for us, because not many of us are facing prison, not many of us watching this are probably facing immediate death. Some of us may, but I doubt it. But I think we can find, a lot of us are struggling. I know personally, I have struggled over the last couple months in a great many ways. I know specific people in my life who are struggling today with things, really hurting, right? And most of them, and as did I, focused on those things rather than trying to take a step back and look at the good around us, right? Look at the good around us. And I'm not talking about ethereal good. I'm talking about like nebulous, something good. Yeah, I'm talking about specific things. We can find our joy. We can find joy in the darkest moments, in our darkest moments, if we focus on the good or if we look for the good around us. Looking for joy doesn't mean ignoring the bad stuff. It does not mean ignoring what's wrong. It doesn't mean that at all. It means paying attention, though, to what is right around us, what is godly around us. It means looking for signs of love still at work in the world. And I believe that. I believe that that love is still at work in the world. So looking for the good around you in the middle of misery doesn't mean ignoring the misery, but it does mean looking for what's right. It means watching the reign of God breaking here on earth right now. When we focus on finding the good in our misery, it actually makes the miserable more tolerable, right? I think that if I had spent more time initially looking for something good in all of the middle of all the crap that was going on, it would have made that initial portion of my struggle a little bit easier. I believe that when we focus on the good or we try to find the good among the misery, it makes the miserable more tolerable. When we try to find the good around us, and I promise, no matter how bad the situation is, there's going to be something good you can find. When you do that, you're choosing joy. And so it goes back to that very first message I gave 3 weeks ago and last week and again this week about every journey starts with a choice. You can choose peace, you can choose hope, and today I'm saying again, you can choose joy. And when you try to focus on the good in the middle of the misery, you're choosing joy. For John, it meant facing prison and death with a clean conscience and the knowledge that he was on the right side of history, right? It meant that he could face his own mortality knowing he was part of kickstarting the kingdom of God breaking into this world. I think that was huge for John. When you spend your life out in the wilderness in camel hair and eating locusts and honey, it probably means that you've committed your life to this thing, and to find out just before you go from this earth that you were right and that you did this thing and that you committed your life to the right cause, to the right message, that is joy. That is John finding joy in the middle of misery. For me, it means focusing on the fact that I continue to get to answer my call, even if it doesn't look like what I thought it would. Ministry looked a whole hell lot different a year ago than it does for me now, right? Me choosing to find the good, me choosing joy in this situation means focusing on the fact that, hey, it's different, but it's there. I still get to answer this call, even if it doesn't look like I thought it would. It means focusing on the love being given to me by people who are being hurt by doing that. It means focusing on that love. It means focusing on those people. There are people in my life right now who are being hurt for loving me, right? It's an amazing thing. What I need to do is focus on that. No, I don't need to focus on the people that are hurting them. Listen, I can do that. I can deal with those people. I can have relationships with those people that are different. But what I need to do to find the good in the middle of this misery is I got to focus on those people who are showing me this love, even though it's getting them shot with arrows on a daily basis. On a daily basis. That for me is focusing on the good in the misery. It makes the misery not even more tolerable, but it makes it worth it in a way. Maybe not for those people, but for me, it makes it worth it because I know that I'm fighting for something that is worth it. I'm fighting for love and I'm fighting for goodness. So what do you need to do? Should seem pretty simple, pretty obvious. That your assignment for week 3 of Advent is to choose joy by focusing on what is good around you. I'm not saying to ignore your misery. I'm not saying to ignore the horrible things that are going on in the world, the things that are going on in your life. I'm not saying ignore that. What I'm saying is those aren't the only things going on in your life. They're not. I could be focusing on my misery. My friends could be focusing on their misery. But that doesn't do anything. That doesn't solve anything. And that will never, ever, ever bring you joy. Never. You'll never find joy by focusing on misery. You will only find joy by focusing on the good things that are around you. And a lot of times, that involves another person, which takes me right back to Isaiah. Joy is communal. It is done not just by yourself. It is done with other people. And it is done when you build up other people and you choose to find the good in the middle of every horrible situation. Now, this is Christmas time. I said it last week, you would think people would be a lot more joyful, but this is probably around the time when most people are joyless. And it's because we focus on the minutia, we focus on the hectic schedule, the making sure we've got all the cookies, the making sure we've got all the invites out, to making sure we haven't snubbed anyone by not inviting them, or then dealing with their hurt feelings if they feel like they should have been invited. Like these are all things we focus on, and then it just saps the joy out. Why? Because we're focusing on the wrong thing. We're not focusing on the fact that, hey, we have cookies, right? We might have a dozen of them, but those are a dozen more than we don't have, right? We're focusing on the fact that we will have some people with us. It may not be the people we thought we'd have, or even maybe the people we thought we wanted. But if you've got somebody with you this Christmas, you are awesome and you are in a very good place. If you don't have somebody with you, man, then you got to dig deeper. You got to dig a little bit deeper and try to find that joy. You got to try to find that thing, that good thing, because I know that can be hard. And I know I might be talking to somebody right now who literally has nobody that will be around them this holiday season. And if that's you, man, just reach out to me. I know a group of people. We can find somebody for you, right? We can find somebody for you. But choose joy this year. Choose it today. Make it a habit. Choose it tomorrow. It's like making your bed. I didn't make my bed ever in my life until about a year ago, when somebody challenged me and said, just make it every day for a week. Just make it every day for a week and see what happens. And now I make it every day. I think joy is the same way. If you choose joy today, and then I make an intentional decision to choose joy tomorrow, it snowballs. And eventually, it just becomes a way of life. And then you realize, I am right with God. I'm feeling these things that you can only feel truly deeply when you're right with God. And that does not mean, you called on the name of Jesus and you're saved and you're going to heaven. Those are byproducts. Getting to heaven is a byproduct of living peace and hope and joy with other people here right now. You do that here right now, heaven's going to take care of itself. Heaven will take care of itself. So, choose peace, choose hope, and this week I say, choose joy. I'm glad you guys watched, and I will hit you up next week with a couple of different messages. We will do one on Sunday. We will also do one on Christmas Eve, probably. I might do it a little sooner than that, but I've got a few in the pipeline for you. So I look forward to hearing from you. And if you have any questions, concerns, comments, leave them in the comments down below, and I will get back at you. Merry Christmas, and say bye, Emmett.
Bye.